Welcome to the Modern Mythos Podcast, a show dedicated to the keepers and players of the Call of Cthulhu and other investigative horror games. I'm Seth Skorkowsky.
And I'm John Hook, and together we'll discuss writing, game mastering, and player tips, and how you can apply them to your table. In this episode, we're talking about Deep Ones.
Bum, bum, bum! I love this. Shadow Over Innsmouth is my favorite of the Lovecraft stories.
Oh, great.
That is, I have a very special love of Deep Ones in Innsmouth. When my wife and I went to Massachusetts for the first time, we did a tour of Lovecraft country. So like we stopped in Ipswich and then we found like where it would be, on the maps because, of course there is no Innsmouth, and it was like late October and really windy and cold. So I've had a photo of me standing on a beach, freezing my butt off in like a light drizzle, just miserable. Just standing on the beach where Innsmouth would be is like the world's largest, puffiest seagull is staring at me like, what the hell are you doing here?
Did you at least throw in some kind of token, a sacrifice, an offering to the great old ones of the sea?
I think if I did that, I'd have to mate with a fish frog, dude. Like, no. I'm married. Otherwise, yes, I would have. Wow, this episode is starting weird.
That went dark quick.
But yeah, so Deep Ones, classic Lovecraft monster, real big staple in the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. First introduced in the Shadow Over Innsmouth by Lovecraft, where there's these fish, frog, humanoid creatures that live in the oceans, and they bribe people with gold, this kind of special gold jewelry, and
Yes,
get them to join their cult in exchange for them joining their cult. But with that comes this clause where people have to mate with them, and the children born of these unions, I guess somewhere in like their like mid-20s is kind of what it looks like from the story. They begin getting what they refer to in the local area as the Innsmouth look, and their hair falls out and their eyes get kind of bulgy. And,
kind of bulgy, yeah. Watery. They have that watery eye look, fuller lips, maybe even a slightly wider smile to them. They might have a few too many teeth, and some of their teeth might be more pointy than you would expect.
A little sharper.
They have the rough. They have the rough skin, the sandpapery rough skin, which I always found interesting that it was always being described as rough skin, for the scales, as opposed to maybe more smooth,
Yeah, I don't think Lovecraft ever actually touched a frog. I think is really what the moral of that story is.
Yeah.
But and then when you hit a certain age, then they start calling you into your dreams, summoning you back to the water, and where you will live forever as a deep one as you transform. And I don't know, I've always loved that story, so I've always had an affinity for deep ones. So I am pumped about this.
I like the deep ones too, and it's also interesting because, in my mind, so many of Lovecraft's creatures, the mythos has origins that are extraterrestrial, coming from beyond the stars, and not that the deep ones are the only terrestrial, but in my opinion, they're the most prominent and most interesting of the terrestrial creatures. Like Earth is their home, which is interesting now that I'm kind of thinking about this, because I'm wondering if there are any alien deep ones? Like, are there deep ones that are indigenous to the oceans of Europa?
Oh, and they're like swimming in the methane lakes of
Right.
of Betis.
Yeah.
Um, so Sandy Peterson has talked about, and one of the things that he has put into his kind of mythos sci-fi system that he's been doing is that DNA is like the signature of the elder things. So, when the elder things come down, they basically created life just because there were these scientists, and so DNA was part of that. And in his kind of space sci-fi universe, when other aliens come across a creature they've ever seen, or when they dissect it like you do, and they find DNA, they're like, oh, we know where this came from. So it's basically like the signature of them. And since deep ones can breed with humans, I think that would allude that they also have DNA, meaning that yeah, they are a relative. I mean, they might horses have DNA, so they don't have to be like totally direct. But they're I think what happened is they might have originally come from it because they do have Shoggoths. They mention that in the Shadow Over Innsmouth, which those definitely came from the Elder Things.
So do
So that
Shoggoths have DNA? Can we breed with a Shoggoth?
oh yeah, man, so many dreams of mine, but not yet. So you're getting weird, man. We're getting to my Japanese film collection, but so then it mentions in the Mountains of Madness how then the octopoid aliens came down and they waged war with humans and or with the elder things. So my theory, and I should float this past Ada sometime, is deep ones might have been humans or some variant of human that got corrupted by Cthulhu because they clearly do worship Cthulhu and they have Mother Hydra and Father Dagon, who are like maybe they're high priests or they're like these sub gods. But then there's Cthulhu at the apex, where maybe Great Cthulhu, his corrupting dreams have turned these creatures. Maybe because they might have been originally a water-faring variant, but since he's in the water, maybe that made them easier to corrupt, and that they so I think that might actually be a long lost breed of humanity that has been really just twisted by its proximity to Cthulhu. That's my theory. I have absolutely zero basis for this other than
No,
Sandy's
not a
theory that
bad,
DNA is the elder things.
not a bad theory. It's interesting, because uh, one of the things that I've seen and read in different sources, and it's not that any of this is canon per se, but how possibly that with the immortality of the deep ones, that maybe some of them continue to grow, right? That they become physically larger specimens. It makes me
There,
wonder if Dagon and Mother Hydra are just simply the Adam and Eve of the deep ones, where kind of maybe leaning into your corrupted human DNA thing is maybe it was just two that were corrupted, Dagon and Hydra, right? Just those two, and then as they continued, in their immortality and chose to, maybe they hadn't reached their enormous scale yet. Maybe they were still human sized, and they were prolific in breeding, right? And started the entire kind of hybrid cycle, you know.
well, because like I have, there's a lot of different lores of stuff because there is like the thing where deep woods do just keep growing, they just
Mhm.
keep going, and like so some of the stuff I've seen is like Dagon and Hydra aren't aren't necessarily gods. They're quite literally the largest. So if Dagon dies, the next largest one becomes Dagon. or if you become larger than Dagon, you become Dagon, or that sort of thing where it's kind of like they're the apex of the kind of the Deepwood society of like they have reached the biggest size. They're the biggest predators, kind of like they're the megalodon sort
Yeah.
of the great whites, and so it could just be a ceremonial sort of term where,
Hmm.
well, it's like you're Dagon now because you're a big boy. So that is a cool one. I like that. I also kind of like the idea that like your idea of like they might be like the Adam and Eve of the whole thing. Like all of it comes back down to them, and I dig that where it was just these two, and because at this point they are millions of years old, they're just uh, colossal in size.
Yeah.
And it's not that anyone can become Dagon. It's like, no, Dagon's been around since he remembers all all of human history because he was there. So
Like
I like that
Pepperidge
perspective.
Farms, Dagon remembers.
Dagon remembers. And so deep ones they have been in countless Skull of Cthulhu scenarios. When we were kind of like
Oh,
preparing our show notes, I started kind of listing it from memory, and I had like five. And then John is all like, "What are you doing? There's the internet, boy." It dropped like 80 on me.
crash 80, but we will cite our great friend Brett Kramer and his Sentinel Hill Press site. So there's a wonderful article from 2017 that does a great list of, at the time, a fairly comprehensive list of Call of Cthulhu adventures, and also Delta Green and a few other publishers as far as the different scenarios. So we're not gonna
Oh,
we're not gonna read them all out here, but
oh no, because there's a lot. But
yeah,
I love the fact that I mean he has got ones in here that are third party press. You mentioned there's like there's Delta Green in there, but uh, I saw like one of the monographs in there. Dead Leaves Fall
yeah,
is
Dead
in
Leaves
there,
Fall.
so
I have a
um,
scenario in Dead Leaves Fall, by the way.
you do.
Not that one, not the title one, but I have another
Oh,
scenario in there.
I say like that's one of the few monographs I have, but I didn't know how many there were. But yeah,
There's a bunch.
this is a pretty monster list that he has put together, and there's been a few that have come out since then. So, but I think kind of the king of them is Raiden Innsmouth,
Yeah.
which is
Radon Innsmouth, which is interesting because it's not a single scenario. It's a collection of scenarios in the Escape from Innsmouth book, and it even talks about in the intro to the book how the scenarios in that book can be run as a campaign, or you could just break them up and run them individually. Um, so I do wish it was greater intent had been made to make it a true campaign, and really link them a little better. And I think Escape from Innsmouth had a second edition publication of it, and I think there's an
before the
extra.
fall.
Yeah, well, Before the Fall is a separate book, but I think there's a when they reprinted Escape from Innsmouth, I think they put another scenario in there. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure, from a collector's standpoint, it's one of those few books where you want to try and get both the first and the second edition printing, because the second edition is slightly different than the first.
I had not known that. It has been out of print longer than I've been playing. So it was always one of those. Uh, I have a PDF from dubious sources, but I've always tried to get like a copy of it, and they're like real pricey because there's the I guess the collector's markup of.
Hmm.
So it's actually always been on my list of ones I would love to see come back. It might need a little bit of cleanup, kind of like how they've done with some of the older
Yeah.
scenarios. I'm sure if Mike does still listen to us, he's like, oh, "Really, guys, you're going to give me more work of what to redo." Thanks, guys. But it was a Keith Herbert classic, and then there was Before the Fall, which was like it came out later, but it was prequel adventures,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
of like, hey, before Escape from Innsmouth. And what I liked about those is when you go through the Innsmouth book, it has all these NPCs of just random people in the town. Like, this is the name of the sheriff and his two deputies, and this is the doctor, and this is the person that operates the switchboard, and all these people were never in the Lovecraft story, but they needed to make for the town, and those same NPCs then appear in the other one. So there's like this consistency to the town in the Chaosium world of that scenario. So you can see different versions of their art between them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're the same characters, and it's I really like the fact that Innsmouth, they have made it very much. It's always Innsmouth. It doesn't. It's not like it's different in every scenario. It's like, no, if we say this is what was on this corner of this and this, that's just what it always is. Which is another reason why Innsmouth, Escape from Innsmouth to come back, because
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of the kind of the canonical Bible of Innsmouth.
It is. It is. It has a great map of Innsmouth. And yeah, they're both really good books. I do that for a long time. Those Innsmouth books were like some of my grail finds, and I have been lucky enough to pick up those copies. I think I also have a second edition, a second edition printing of Escape from Innsmouth. So I've got both types. I know I have the first edition of Escape from Innsmouth, but I think I have a second as well. But
You're just flaunting at me
I
right
just
now.
flaunting it.
Yeah, I don't even remember. I have so many copies of it. Anyways, good luck finding one because I own them all.
they're only a little damp from the saliva when I was just fawning over them. Oh, they finally arrived. So
And
I
so
mean,
so
I had to choose. Do I save for my children's college, or do I buy these books? And I was like, clear choice, buy the books. Buy the books. That's what I did.
surefire investment, man. I think you made the right choice. But
Well, I know my kids are good, strong enough to dig ditches. That's fine.
my God. So now the Sentinel Press list ended in 2017. There have been more since then. Um, Waiting for the Hurricane, which is found in the Pulp Cthulhu book, is a pulp adventure where you've got deep ones, and then there was another one we ran. What was it? Star on the Shore, which
Hmm.
has deep ones, and is takes place in Rockport, which is also just right there. Because right after we visited the beach where Innsmouth would be, we then went to Rockport itself. And because we played that adventure for like 3 months, my wife and I knew our way around the town because we had been looked at that map so many times.
That's
True
awesome.
story.
That's
We
awesome.
visited all these locations. I'm like, hey, here's where so and so got killed. But so that one had the deep ones in it. Angel's Thirst, which was in Cults of the Cthulhu book, had that. And my own adventure that I did with New Tales of Miskatonic Valley, A Mother's Love,
So
featured that.
cool. So
And
cool.
and while I haven't read it because I'm playing it with the How We Roll podcast, there's the Flotsam and Jetsam campaign that they haven't released to the public. It's, I guess, part of like one of their what is it called? Its name is escaping me. The Chaosium
Like
Keeper,
the Cults of
Cults
Chaos.
of Chaos. Yes, there's
Yeah.
like there's the word chaos, and I
So yeah, Flotsam Jetsam has been released though.
has it officially been released now?
Yeah, there's a hardcover book for it.
Oh, sweet. Good. I
Yep.
finally get around to reviewing that. But we've been playing that with Scott Dorward. And we go to Innsmouth at one point. Currently on our current one, it's looking really likely like there are deep winds in Great Lakes of around Michigan. So
Hmm.
I can't read it right now, but like I
Yes.
say, from what we've played,
Yes. Hmm. Stroking the beard. Yes. Hmm. Yes. Well, we'll just let that lie for now. We won't. We won't continue to uncover that conversation. But yeah, there are so many scenarios out there with deep ones. There's a lot, in the classic stuff, and some few that are available in more modern publications. So, uh, you know, and something we didn't even try to investigate is there might also be um, Miskatonic repository scenarios that
oh
feature
yeah.
deep ones. And I'm not even sure how, if someone was, intentionally looking for a scenario with deep ones and wanted to use the repository. I'm not aware of a index yet, but maybe someone's working on one that could be used to zero in on something like that. But kind of browse through and read the descriptors for each of those Miskatonic repository scenarios, and maybe you'll find one that has deep ones in it. So lots of options out there, though, for sure. If you wanted to run a scenario that features the deep ones, deep ones are so prolific in just pop culture that it's not just Call of Cthulhu scenarios where these fish people, the Society of Fish People, and their gods of Dagon and Hydra can be found. There's video games. I personally haven't played it, but my understanding is that the Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth game will also include and feature deep ones.
Oh yeah. Well, I played it, and yeah, you spend a lot of time at Innsmouth. It's very much a computer game version of Raid of Innsmouth.
Ah, okay, okay.
And well, I haven't played The Witcher. The Witcher does have the fish frog people who worship Dagon, evidently. So
All right.
it's been around for so long. It's in the public domain. So I think a lot of there's a lot of ability to give those nods to where it came from, because before you couldn't be as direct uh, with it. So when you would have like your fish frog monsters appear in different things, it could be kind of alluded these might be related, or they
Uh-huh.
could just be the gill man from Creature from Black Lagoon. Who knows? But
Right.
um
Who knows?
and so there's a ton. And but let's talk about them. We've got these immortal creatures who can breed with humans, who uh human beings will think they're humans possibly until their 20s sometime, and they start begin changing. Like how how can keepers use this in their games?
Uh, that's a great question. So, I think for a lot of keepers, um, they're most likely going to be used as foes and NPCs. I mean, it could be interesting to have a player character be a Deep One hybrid, but my fear as a keeper would be that I don't feel like I could run a entire team of investigators where they're all Deep One hybrids. And if they're not all Deep One hybrids, and you've only got one or maybe two who are Deep One hybrids, then it feels like there's a definite power shift. Because the Deep One hybrids potentially, because players are going to want to try and min max. Even the ones who say they don't skew that way, once you say, oh, you might have fish powers, they're suddenly going to want to start exploiting some of those fish powers, right? Can I breathe underwater? Can I swim super fast? Do I have, am I Aquaman now, right? So
Well, if so, when I was going through Milius One Storm, it talks about the hybrids. They can't breathe water, but they can hold their breath twice as long as
Hmm.
humans. Which, hey, that is cool, but it's not quite superpower level. But you would still have like their appearance would start going through the floor. And while appearance does not really, it doesn't have a mechanical effect on stuff like charm. Um, I would definitely give them a penalty die for a lot of the interpersonal abilities because they're just ugly, by human standards. They've got this kind of lumpy, rough skin, these like extra wide lips, these bulgy eyes, their little ears sticking out, and they're just uh, they're not exactly pleasant to look at. So yeah, there is going to be that sacrifice, and in a game like Call of Cthulhu, which it is very role play heavy. So, interpersonal skills are so important. That is a big deal to suddenly start losing those because you wanted to have the ability to breathe water. So I think, and I don't know, I think as like maybe a one shot adventure, I think it would be cool to play a group of deep one hybrids that are maybe sent
Yes.
out to
Yeah,
go
depending
recover
upon the
something.
scenario. Yeah, yeah. I think it would be great to have a full team of investigators as, you know, pre-generated characters for a one-shot scenario you could play out and be deep one hybrids. In a ongoing campaign, I think it's probably more likely that the deep ones or deep one hybrids they're all going to be NPCs, if not outright, antagonists, right? The
Yeah,
opponents.
I said so I still see the possibility of maybe they if the quest is to stop the transformation, or like that's the countdown as you are transforming and your sanity is cracking, because that was in the original story. That's what's happening by the end to our protagonist, is as his sanity is cracking, because his deep one blood is awakening. uh if the adventure quite literally is to stop it from doing this to you. And every session or every chapter, everyone's sanity takes another hit. Like their max sanity just drops by this much again, because once it's zero, that's when you transform and you've got to go back. You got to go to the water. I think that could actually be a really cool one, where instead of being sent by the esoteric warder to do some deep one business and then get back home, it is the race against time. And instead of it being the end of the world, like Massive Nyarlathotep or something, it's the end of your humanity for just the protagonists of, we gotta find the amulet of whatever and do the ceremony of whatever, or whatever, whatever the quest is, to stop ourselves from becoming these things. A bunch of
Yeah.
kids grew up in an orphanage. They never knew who their parents were, and then the truth comes out,
And then
and
the truth
got
comes out.
now they've only got so long to stop it. There's a couple cool ways you could do it.
That's true. That could be done well. I think it's interesting because, well, you and I both. This is a little bit of behind the scenes. Is that Seth and I, and Seth I believe is already done, or well done. He's been done for a while, but we're both reading a book called Winter's Tide or Wintertide by Ruth Ann Emrys, and in that book, our main character, our protagonist, is a young woman who is well aware and has been for decades
Mhm.
that she is of the people of the water, and it's interesting because you're talking about this scenario where you suddenly have this awakening and now you want to uh, stop the possibility of the transformation. Whereas I keep thinking about these characters in Wintertide, and the transformation is puberty, right? And we don't even as humans, we don't normally think about trying to stop puberty, um, or alter the natural course of, of nature, of a person's nature of growing and maturing. It's funny I say that, but I am aware of actual real life things where in medical science you're not trying to stop puberty, but you try and slow it down. You try and
As I like,
delay it.
there's that, and but Winter Tide, what I find, I love that book. Is Your protagonist grew up in one of the camps that it Shadow Over Innsmouth. The government comes in, they raid Innsmouth, and they take all the residents, they throw them in these camps, and that's where she grew up. So she was always known what this was, and it's post World War II, and she is now in her 20s and knows that she will be transforming soon. We don't know how long, but she's trying to basically recover the religion of her people, because it was this kind of water religion, and they get hired by the basically the CIA, I think.
Yeah, it's basically the CIA. But it's interesting. You say that she's in her 20s, which she probably is in her 20s. And the book is set post World War II. But, she was captured, and it was, post World War One.
Yeah,
Uh,
1928, I believe, was the raid in Innsmouth.
y-
1928 or
I
27.
think, yeah. So, it was between two world wars, and she was old enough when captured that she was journaling. She was keeping a diary
Yeah, she wasn't
because,
like an infant.
yeah, she
She was
wasn't
a
an
little, she
infant.
was a
Yeah,
child,
she
but
wasn't an
it
infant,
wasn't.
but she was journaling, and I'm already at the part where she's rediscovered, hey, that was my diary that is now part of the Miskatonic
Miskatonic
University,
Innsmouth collection.
collection, the Innsmouth collection. She's like, I want my book back, but it's so interesting because I feel like the time is a little wibbly wobbly, a little stretchy there, because she does still seem super young, but it also seems like, these Innsmithians, the Innsmithians were captured. They were put into a camp, a holding camp, because heaven forbid anyone say that America had concentration camps, but they were put
That's
into a
exactly what they called it in Shadow Over Innsmouth.
right, exactly. They're in these concentration camps, but then these camps, because the people and their intent were kind of forgotten. Those camps then got
Repurposed.
repurposed as Japanese holding camps, as they rounded up Japanese Americans, for in air quotes their protection. And now the Innsmithians and the Japanese are all living together, and yeah, the government just kind of forgot, just kind of forgot
Because it
about
talks about
the Innsmouth
sh-
people.
as they grew up there, and people would transform because they were in the desert, and
Yeah,
they
they
were
would
these
just
aquatic
perish.
creatures. They would die. So it's basically our protagonist and her brother, who were so young when they went, that by the time World War II's ended, they basically throw open the doors to this camp. They're like, okay, well, you're all free. The last two residents of Innsmouth kind of just walk out. And then the government's like, well, okay, we'll just basically have a parole officer, but you're free. And she has like this Japanese family that's adopted her. from their time at their camp. They're living in San Francisco at the beginning, and then the CIA comes in and says the Soviets are trying to get a hold of certain things at Miskatonic that was they got from Innsmouth, and we want you to help us out. And now she has to basically work for the government that they were in a camp for her younger years. And it's a really cool twist
Yeah,
on how she actually keeps it very consistent with Lovecraft's stories, but at the same time, it's a very different interpretation, and I
it
like that.
is. Yeah,
Uh,
I'm liking it a lot as well. The one thing that I have kind of thought about, and I thought no one found this weird, is as the Innsmouthians were, maturing, transforming, and dying in the desert. Um, wouldn't that camp have gotten a bit of a weird uh,
she's staying.
reputation?
Oh,
Because aren't the camp guards consistently going, "How did an alligator get in?" And now we have to bury an alligator because it must have eaten one of the camp residents. So let's
well,
bury this alligator. And how many times does that have to happen before the guards are like, dude, someone is falling down on the job. What's going on here? Right?
well, I think it's pretty safe to say that the guards at the camp, at least between the end of Shadow Over Innsmouth and the outbreak of World War II, were perfectly aware of what this was, because in like the Delta Green universe, that was the origin story of Delta Green, was when the
Right.
government raid,
Right. Right.
and the government suddenly has this like, holy crap, there are inhuman monsters and cults, because uh they had to have dealt with the fact there were Shoggoths in that town, which you know you know Johnny GI had to deal with. And so I'm pretty sure the guards were perfectly aware, but the population had just been steadily going down over that 14 15 year spread until World War II kicks off. And then they probably did have to increase their staff, but at that point, most of them are perish with
Yeah,
dehydration.
maybe they just didn't worry about it because one, I'm sure the physical specimens were so thin and frail they didn't probably appear to be of any kind of danger. And then, as people were aging out and becoming monsters, they just kind of kerplunk, you know, and then they just like buried them behind the shed. So, yeah.
And one of the other things, though, which to talk about, is the film of
Ugh.
Shadow Innsmouth,
I
Dagon.
really like Dagon. It's
I
a really
loved
good
it.
movie.
Which is Stuart Gordon, who
Hmm.
is famous for his Lovecraft adaptations. But what made Dagon very different is it's set in Spain, and so instead of it being like a Massachusetts community, it's this kind of like remote Spanish coastal town. And his deep ones are extra monstrous. But when we meet our, I guess, our princess, who is it, Macarena Gomez, who I'm totally butchering the pronunciation, I'm positive, who was then later in 30 Coins, which you and I both
Yes,
talked about. Um,
yes, 30
her,
coins.
her mutation was like tentacle legs,
Yeah.
which is actually still canonical with Call of Cthulhu, because like 10%, I think, of the which I read Mealis Monster like an hour ago, and I'm like, I don't know, my memory is going, John, but they will develop these other traits, and they're considered like extra blessed. Where, but they have these other mutations where it's like tentacle faces or tentacle limbs. So in Dagon, if you were to say, is like, well, is this like Call of Cthulhu canonical? Like, their princess had tentacle legs, and in the Call of Cthulhu role playing game canon, those were the extra blessed. So yes, it fits perfectly.
Yep, totally fits. Totally
And
fits.
I love that. I love that film. It was I had very low expectations when I got in, so uh, it was a very pleasant surprise because I mean I was like, this is about to be the worst film I've ever seen as I hit play, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, I had seen it, I'm assuming soon after it had, released. Uh but it was only like a year ago I actually bought the Blu-ray and watched it, and it was fantastic. I There was so much about it that I had forgotten. It was dynamite. Yeah, it was really, really well done.
Yeah. So, um, but no, I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed that kind of spin that he was able to do to it because it's also since it's a modern day story, and we talked before. There's a lot of uh, people who want to play Call of Cthulhu not in the 1920s but present day. And it's like, well, how would you do the Shadow Over Innsmouth in the present day? That wouldn't be possible, and Dagon shows you how. But it does require some significant changes. But it still works because the core story is still the same.
The core story is still the same, and that was one I think. Thinking about the film and the choices that Stuart Gordon made, uh, setting setting the village in Spain was genius, because even in modern times, in modern day, there are still villages that, yeah, they'll have a couple of modern conveniences, but by and large,
I mean, they have like
time
electricity and sewage and all that,
yeah,
but
they'll have time. Yeah, they'll have electricity. They'll have sewage. And even in even more modern, like true modern versus the '80s when Gordon made the film. There might be a couple of places that are internet cafes or something, right? Uh, but
2001.
no, it wasn't. Was it
Yeah.
really?
Yeah,
Oh my
dude.
god! It looks and feels like an '80s film, but it's brilliant.
I mean,
But
the
the
CGI is a little dated.
the great thing about it is because you have these places like an old Spanish village that seem timeless. Because you get that escape from modern technology. In the very beginning of the movie, the yacht that they're on is very modern, and it's got a great radio. Well, it has a radio, but they're having trouble using it and everything, and they're like, oh, someone's injured. Oh, let's go to the mainland to get a doctor and maybe get some radio for help. And, oh my gosh, what happened to the boat? But it was a great way to take your viewer, because you're following the heroes, these Americans who are out there on the boat. It's a great way to take them from a super modern thing, this boat, and get them into the oh my
Kind of like
gosh,
an
this feels
old,
so old world.
yeah, very old world European coastal village that is nobody really has any reason to visit it. So that's kind of how it's remained isolated and kind of timeless. So, uh, and like I think one I was wearing his Miskatonic shirt through the whole thing.
Oh, that's
It's
right.
yeah,
That's right.
it's those little details that always like make me like yeah.
Yes, 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 yes.
But so there are these the different takes to him because with Anna Ambrose she has like this 1950s spy story where Deep Ones are our protagonist, and then we've got uh Gordon took just the original story and modernized it for 2001.
Oh my god.
But you're right.
Wow.
It has the feel of a Stuart Gordon movie, which were very big in the 80s, which means yes, it actually does have that 80s movie vibe. because it has a Stuart Gordon vibe. So
Yeah.
that's the only reason I can kind of bust you on that one, but concede you're right.
Oh my
This
gosh,
is what
that's
you get for
awesome.
getting all the copies of Raid on Innsmouth when nobody else can get one, John.
That's right. That's right.
But kind of going back to that the idea of like according to the actual game lore, like 10% of the hybrids become these blessed versions, which could have tentacles. There's like a shark one they talk about, which it then really doesn't go into. It's like, hey, there's a shark mutations that could happen, which is like, I don't know. Has that become like the character from Suicide Squad all of a sudden? I mean,
Oh my god, yeah, King Shark.
King Shark, which a lot of them, are uh, kind of like these hideous. They said they have no education because they basically lock them in the sheds or in the attics in Innsmouth and whatnot. So like they're the blessed ones, but they're like the ones that are then locked away, and then a good portion of them never change, but the genes could cause it to still go on and then maybe skip a generation or two. And then all of a sudden, someone finds out they're a deep one, even though their parents are both normal people
Mm-hmm.
and might not even be aware. And I think that's also what happened in Shadow Over Innsmouth, where it was like his cousin and his uncle had changes, but it was like this kind of like weird, long, twisted thing to figure out where his deep one blood came from. So there could be that, which once again, that'd be a cool little hook for your characters. Is you could literally spring it at anybody because it skipped a generation. Well, this came from your grandpappy,
What
your
was?
grandma.
Yeah, was and refresh my memory. Was Zadok Allen? Was he also a hybrid that just didn't change, or was he
No, he
one
was
of
like,
the original humans and was just being ignored because he was a drunkard?
yeah, he was just a original human. He was a young boy when all of this happened, and when the hero meets him, he's in his 90s, I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, he's kind of this crazy old man who is this drunk, and uh basically I guess he's kind of also at the point of life where he just doesn't care anymore, and he's kind of like had this on his chest, and our hero gives him some like moonshine or some whiskey, and gets him to tell the story. And Cheez-Its, which I don't know if you saw the little thing somebody pointed out where he thought he had these little cheese crackers, and Cheez-Its technically came out like shortly before the story did. So it's most likely our hero bribed Zadok Allen with like bootleg
Oh
whiskey and
wow,
Cheez-Its.
that's funny.
Totally changes my mental picture, and all for the
Yeah, it
better.
does.
But Zadok was always human, but he never took the final oath to Dagon of the three O's. So he was kind of untouchable as long as he doesn't betray them. And then he, for whiskey and cheese, it's absolutely betrays them, and then is never heard from again. Uh, whiskey and
Yeah,
cheese, it's man. That's how you that's how you get the story.
they weren't sure until the deep ones saw Zadok and he had all that cheese dust around his lips. They were like, "Oh, you bastard!"
Well, they're addictive, so it's part of that. He probably gave him like two, and Zach's like, "Hey, man, can I have some more of those?" Like, I don't know, man. You keep talking about what happened in this town. He just rationed him Cheez-Its. Like, I'll give you more if you tell me. And Zadok had no choice at that point. But
Yes.
so 10% do become these monstrous things. 10% don't transform, but a lot of them, which there's a doctor in Innsmouth who is in that category. He's like a hybrid, but he never makes the full transformation. Uh, so he just kind of just lives in Innsmouth, knowing what's going on. But he's like old because most of the Innsmouth people they don't get old when they get to a certain age. They just kind of vanish because they go off to the water. So the fact that he's like an older guy who is a deep one, and living in town still out in the public, because he never transformed. And I also think that adds a good opportunity for spies, because in that it was treated like a shame, and that's cool. But it's also, I think, the esoteric order, or whoever is in charge of whichever community of hybrids they have, can be like, hey, we noticed that you seem to be taking a while to become a fish, so why don't we throw some of our ample gold around, pay the right people, and get you a job with the CIA, or get you a job with these different companies, like Boeing, and and that way, between the ample money that the deep ones clearly have, and this percentage that never actually fully transform, but are very likely loyal to the deep ones, that could actually go out and act as spies. Uh, I also think that that would mean that the deep ones could be pretty cognizant of everything that humanity does.
Oh,
Like,
I love that angle. One of the things that I've thought about is that the deep ones, the true creatures that have they're full bodied fish frog creatures, they don't necessarily have to come to the surface and you know create listening posts or something to try and figure out what the surface world is doing, because they constantly have an influx flow of new members joining the underwater cities as these hybrids that do transform, not the ones that stagnate, but the ones that do transform, you know, in their time as a human living and working amongst, other humans, they're also reading newspapers and going to the movies and holding down jobs and
and they're on TikTok.
Right, they're getting all of the current, technology and information, and so as these hybrids transform and go underwater, and they begin their new life, their eternal life underwater, they're the ones who are bringing education, the latest and greatest knowledge to the society of deep ones. I almost have this vision where as you come down to the cities, Johannesburg, underwater. I'm sure there are lots of jobs and lots of positions that deep ones fill, within their society. But I would assume that brand new members of the society, people who were only just recently human and are now deep ones, for at least a year, their job is storyteller. Their job is teacher, because they are educating all of the existing deep one society on what is current, what is modern above, on the surface world, and then that way the entire society grows and stays up to date with what's going on, right?
Oh
you
yeah,
know
and
how else will the deep ones figure out who shot JR, right? It's only after someone has come down to tell them.
well, I also have this theory that they were probably watching that live, like when the transatlantic cable was dropped many years ago. I like to think that pretty quickly some deep ones swam up and tapped into it, because they're not dumb, they're not primitive, they just have a different society, and they have a ton of gold. I've never quite figured out how they do their goldsmithing underwater. Like, that's got to be tricky. But so they could have been very, very up to date on certain technology, and possibly Innsmouth was their wake up call of like, Oh wow, these because like they shot like torpedoes at Ythanale, and it didn't fully destroy it. And probably the survivors after that are like, okay, humanity is clearly evolving like a lot faster than they have been for the past thousands of years, and we got the money, and we're never going to let that happen again. And so I like to think that they're pretty up to date on a lot of stuff just themselves, because they have basically tapped into whatever our information was. And you could say that maybe certain ships that have gone down were also kind of their things. Like we understand that they have nuclear technology. Well, when the Scorpion torpedo sub went down, or nuclear sub went down in a tragic accident, well, they were down there with some nuclear missiles.
Yep.
And they get access to all of this. So I kind of like the idea that in kind of that category where like the federal government after the raid is like, okay, we know these things exist. That at the same time, the deep ones are like, okay, they know we exist, and they have technology that can actually get to us now. So both of them are kind of creating their own race against each other, and the deep ones have uh, money. They have people. They have their own kind that look human, uh, for at least for a time. Some of them much longer, and they do have access to basically everything of ours that goes in the water. Uh, they can get. So I don't know. I kind of like the idea of like, what does Ythanale look like now? And maybe it does have that. There's a deep one internet, like there's a Facebook that only exists underwater.
Absolutely, absolutely. They have a forest of just these missiles that they've extracted from sunken subs, and they're all just standing vertical in a like a in a garden, waiting to be deployed or something.
Oh yeah, it's all masked under like carefully manicured corals, so
Hmm.
it looks, from above or anything of like, well, this is just a really healthy coral reef, and nobody knows that there are basically organically grown launch tubes that are worked into it. And I think that kind of adds like a different flair to um, the threat that they could give uh, player characters in any sort of scenario. And the Yathanale is only one of many cities. Uh, so there are um, Angel Tears talks about there's one that's off of the California coast, and I think another adventure talked about there's one near Japan, and there had to have been one that was out in the Pacific Islands, according to Shadow Over Innsmouth. So there are a lot of Deepwind cities,
Yeah,
and Flotsam Jetsam. I'm pretty sure that there might be a Great Lakes community. So I kind of like the idea of, one, they don't even have to be a cohesive like nation. They could be they could actually have their own culture issues between them, and
yeah,
but they're also everywhere. And if they do have the ability to basically harvest humans technology, mix it with their own, because they've got their own brilliant minds, and when they have a brilliant mind, their brilliant mind doesn't die of age. you know their Albert Einstein is still kicking it because they live forever.
absolutely.
So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about deep ones in game. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed kind of trying to design, extrapolate, and like, oh, how would this work? Is like a deep one weapon technology. You know, yeah, deep ones have claws and teeth. but they also have the ability to wield uh, human or human-like weapons, right? I mean, deep ones for the most part are bipedal and five-fingered hands, opposable thumbs. So you know
Yeah, I
they
mean they can clearly operate goldsmithing tools.
goldsmithing
S-
tools, sure.
So if they could clearly do that, uh, then yes, they would have access to weapons and tools and everything that can operate with their big webbed hands and claws. It's all perfectly designed and adapted for them.
Hmm.
So yeah, of course
Well,
they would
and
have.
because I mean, not only would they have magic, but I think they would also have like alchemical, right? They might have vast experiments and vast experience in doing crossbreeding or genetic mutations, and they might be able to alter and create things like I love this idea of an urchin that could be used as either a grenade or just as a bomb, right? So you could, stick an urchin to a wall, and then, the urchin, because it's a living creature, has almost like a proximity sensor in it, and if it senses what it perceives as danger, because humans don't excrete the same pheromones that a deep one does. So if an urchin doesn't smell deep one and smells anything other than deep one, it'll explode and sending just these fragmentary shards of urchin spines everywhere.
I dig it.
Poison tipped urchin spines.
And as someone who's absolutely terrified of sea urchins, that works for me. I don't know if I've disclosed that. I'm terrified of them.
That's awesome. That is so
Um,
awesome.
but no, and think about it, those. They would just be hanging around deep communities, just hanging out on the corals,
Yeah.
just like others. And if a diver or somebody does start getting too close, then they go off. Or if a deep one comes to shore, they reach basically their grenade pouch, which is probably a tube filled with water. If salt water, they pull out one of their little urchin pets and roll it into a room. I don't know if you can roll an urchin, but roll it into a room.
At least toss it, right?
Like, yeah, they toss it and it hits Gary, and everybody looks at Gary like, "Oh my god, that looks bad!" And then it explodes. It hits everybody.
Yep.
Just, no, because
Yeah, I
you,
mean,
you
I'd love to, maybe they through maybe through spell technology, they could alter a conch shell for some kind of auditory weapon. Blow through the conch shell, and then cause vertigo, or screw up your inner ear, and have you know some vertigo damage or something.
yeah, where it's like using the technology of whales and dolphins, they have created some sort of sound based weapon that causes basically you're stunned, or you have a penalty die for a certain amount of time if you were in the blast or you weren't able to make the correct stat save for it, where you now have a penalty die for a set number of rounds because your inner ear is just completely screwed up. And they're so formidable just by themselves because they have natural armor and the claws of the teeth. But then when you start adding in uh, sound weapons and exploding urchins, like, holy crap, these things are
I
terrifying.
Yeah, I love the idea of maybe there's a strain of deep ones that have almost like cuttlefish camouflage abilities. You know,
No,
I
see,
mean,
now, while I'm afraid of urchins, I love cuttlefish. So, like, keep going.
Like that could be really, really cool, right? You're walking through a room or something, and the lumpy, there's just clothing or something, you know, draped over that couch. Well, it's a deep one who's reclining and sitting still, waiting for you to get close enough for them to strike out.
I love that in the John Hook cinematic universe, Predator was just a deep one.
That's it. Yes.
That's all it was. Yeah, a deep one went up to the dry land for a hunting expedition and met Arnie.
And said, "What the hell are you?"
But because I think one of the things that a lot of game masters will naturally do is treat a lot of the monsters like they are kind of primitive and kind of dumb, and they can't possibly match our technology. Sure, they have magic and claws, but we have X, and the deep ones aren't dumb at all, and,
No.
they're also regularly getting, as you brought up, this new blood from the mainland that can tell them all about the wonders of what's going on the surface, and their own education mixed with the fact that their own brilliant scientists and mathematicians are you know the contemporaries of Pythagoras, but they're still alive, and they're Isaac Newton's still kicking too, and they've got their own science technology that they've developed that's also acclimated to their environment. That so of course, yeah, they've got their own advancements, their own genetics that they've been
Oh my
working on.
gosh. They're so closely, not that they're related to, but they use Shoggoths, and because a Shoggoth really is just a living weapon, and
Oh yeah.
so there's no reason why Deep One scientists couldn't be uh, studying the Shoggoth, doing DNA experiments and research on the Shoggoth, so that there might be Deep One super soldiers who have Shoggoth DNA infused into their DNA, so now they can shift back into human form, or at the very least, Deep One hybrid form, to walk around on dry land with two legs and then morph back into Fishman, you know,
Oh.
as they go back underwater and then come back up and get into their legs again. And, you
See,
know,
see, here I was. I thought you were leading up to like they're juicing on Shoggoth steroids, and you suddenly turned it into where like no, they're taking the shape shifting abilities from like oh
shape
that's so much
shifting.
better. I was picturing this just like enormous bodybuilder fish fries,
Right. Just on the juice.
but uh, so I think that the opportunities that could lead to with keepers, especially like the idea that of the conspiracy that they're uncovering of there are people who are in power who have either been bribed or are involved with the deep ones by blood or religion who they have placed there. So it's not just like oh all of us on the land are cool and the bad guys are below. It's like no, the bad guys have been doing this for so long and they're so smart and they're so ingrained that you have no idea who in these positions of power and authority is either bought or a member of this. And then you throw in the shapeshifter, your T1000 of you know
D. It's a D1000.
Okay, yeah, D1000
for the deep
um,
one.
that can do this. It does start making it where uh, your player characters are kind of really realizing how small their world is and who they can and cannot trust.
Right?
Starts shrinking a lot because the people that designed their cell phones might have put the chips in their cell phones might have been deep ones, and the deep ones now have an ability to uh, hack into a lot of technology because they put their people there since the beginning
Oh my god.
of that
Yeah,
technology.
deep ones could be in especially in modern times, deep ones could be doing app development, right? And so as they're masking and they're creating apps, especially like marine life apps, to where, with this app you can do fish finder, right? And do underwater sonar or whatever. It's actually also, what they don't realize is it's doing it in reverse as well. So when you trigger that app, the deep ones are going, okay, there's 6 humans on that boat, and we know where they're all positioned because the fish finder app, the fisherman finder app is telling us,
I love it. It's sending sonar pings above and below.
Yeah. You turn on this app, and for some reason your ears ring. You get a little bit of tinnitus, when it's happening. It's like, why is this every time squawk, squawk, smacking your phone? And it's
But
because it's sending a low level signal.
that's also the reason that it doesn't pick up the deep ones below. All of
Right.
this great marine technology that's the newest underwater listening device from MIT, and like, why can't they find Yathanale? It's like, well, fun story about the development team of that technology. Is
Here's yeah,
it
here's their
physically
college
cannot
picture.
see them. Yeah.
Here's their college picture. None of them had girlfriends. So,
Well, it's just like, do you realize how many deep ones have MIT rings? I mean, really?
right.
I mean, it's a Boston University. I mean,
Where do
it's
you think
not that far
MIT's
from your thought away.
Where do you think MIT's getting the gold?
Oh yeah. So, I love the idea of the fisherman finder, but if they've been this ingrained for this long, that really does add to the threat, because our technology could be compromised, but they have their own that is advanced, such as their gene splicings and different things that they've done. So, wow, these things are way more terrifying after this conversation, at least for
Right?
me.
And I was also thinking about, do all deep ones need to be uh, antagonists? Are they all just, evil for evil's sake? I say no. And it's interesting because I feel like, depending upon the the deep ones home, right, whichever underwater village or possibly city, because I could imagine deep ones living in almost like a village, level of society versus city level society, and I feel like the cities would be a lot deeper and more hidden, whereas the villages could be more shallow and closer to the surface. And it would all depend upon, at least it seems obvious to me, it would all depend upon the environmental cycle. Like, what what is the humans impact on the environment in that area. If it's a place where there's a lot of overfishing, because hey, deep ones might be fish, but guess what, they still eat fish, right? There's plenty of fish that are predator against other fish. And so if humans are overfishing, that's threatening the food source for those deep one homes. If there's any pollution or anything like that's all ingrained motivations for the deep ones to be hostile to the surface people. But then think about deep one villages that might be near, you know, native islands or remote, uh, surfing towns, right? Or
Just more laid back.
the Hawaiian Islands, just something so laid back. Those deep ones would be more, kind of the hey, dude, hang loose, and super chill, you know.
Well, because there's also just the communities where the hybrids are. They're not just bringing that human knowledge with them. They're bringing whatever that local culture is. In a lot of ways, it might be staggered because of just how long it takes for it so it filter down. So uh, you could have where just different parts of the world, you have more of a Soviet Union sort of community near them because that was where their hybrids are coming from, and they're bringing that culture, they're bringing that mindset down there. So if you have your Hawaiian Islands, and you do have your uh, the locals, and they have that just kind of it's island time, man. It's much more laid back and cool. They're bringing that down to the underwater city, and it probably does have a lot of the same culture shock of like, oh, the damn kids, they're so lazy with their you know with their TikToks, and but yeah, they would have the culture shift. They wouldn't always have to be unified. Of like we must squash humanity, because you could have some that are like we have to squash humanity because Cthulhu, and you could have some that's like man, we have to for these environmental reasons. And you get so it's like, hey guys, I spent like 30 years hanging out with the humans, and yeah, some of them are dicks, but a lot of them are really cool. And uh, maybe we could work together, and we don't have to be bad guys. So I think there would be uh different kind of factions with it. I think it's like one of those things of popular fiction, like with Star Trek, where like all the people of this species speak the same language, but then you look at Earth right now, it's like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yep.
we have like 300 active languages or something right now. So like, but yeah, sure, of course, all the Klingons speak one language. But so the deep woods would probably have the same just complexity of personalities that you would have with humans because they clearly have a lot of connections to humans. So um, you could also have an adventure where the player characters have deep one allies that
Yes.
are they're like, hey, we're not really a popular faction where we're from, but um, we know that this certain disaster, maybe a natural, maybe mythos disaster, is coming because of our own technology, right? Our seismic sensors are way better than yours, and we're going to warn you about this, but but we're not supposed to do this because our government thinks that we should be enemies, but at the same time, we don't want you to get wiped out by a volcano or a tsunami or a star spawn or whatever it is, because I don't think we have to be at war with each other. And if the player characters have also come across deep ones before, to suddenly come across, Scotty the friendly deep one would definitely be a shock.
Hmm.
Of
Yeah, deep ones have reasons to try and preserve humanity because, breeding. So, there's that too. Something that I was, from a game aspect, um, the sanity loss. Now, I understand that you don't want every monster to uh, break, you know, the investigator, the players, investigators sanity. I mean, you want it to kind of be a slow build, but it's so interesting because whereas with the deep one hybrids, I can see having a sand loss of a 0/1d4 with the full on, full, adult deep one that's fully transformed, the sand loss is still a 0/1d6.
Yeah,
That seems
kind of
low to me,
it,
right?
kind of weak,
Kind of
but
weak.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like some of the creatures I do feel might be a little low, others I feel might be a little high. Um, it's like uh, the Hounds of Tinlidos, like D20.
Right.
It's
That
like,
skews a little on the high side. Although because of the D20 sand loss, I've actually been adjusting the way that I describe Towns of Tindalos to make it more fitting for a D20 loss, right? I tried to make it a more alien and more just horrific to where you're like, oh my God, yes, I will roll the D20 now.
oh yeah, well, because you've got you're kind of like where they're almost like the shards of glass
Yeah. Yeah.
sliding off each other, and it's like, oh yeah, this is great, because it's nothing like how like the picture gives any sort of
Right.
impression.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
because I almost feel like the word hound is used as a descriptor because of the predatory hunting and tracking aspect of the creatures, and not due to any form of quadruped man's best friend kind of descriptor, you know.
yeah, and it was always kind of described that with those, the term hound isn't necessarily even like the way they look. It's the fact they hound you. They
Hmm.
chase you through time,
They
like hounds
track
on a
you.
fox. Uh, but of course, we hear that and we're all like, oh, so they're like time dogs. Like,
Yep.
no, it's a metaphorical hound. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's it's not Spot. It's it's
Yeah. It's not Spot. They're relentless.
yeah, just but yeah, even the monstrous deep one hybrids, like those are only a D6 if you've got tentacles for arms and coming out of your face and all that. So yeah, it
Yeah.
does seem a little light.
Which is why, as a keeper, I always feel completely comfortable in. I just skew and redo sand loss as I feel like it befits the situation. You know, so like with the hybrids, I mean, it's a human with exaggerated features and fishy features. I like the 0/1d4 for them. Great. With the full on adults, depending upon the situation, I might do like a D3 slash maybe D6 plus one, D6 plus two, maybe a D8, something like that, depending.
Well, especially the other things though that if you think about would cause sand lice is like hybrids are creepy and weird, and deep ones are creepy and weird, but also the realization that human beings, that are living with us and interacting with us every day, could, even not even knowing it themselves, transform into these. That should also be another one, because like that's kind of like where the body horror comes in.
Oh,
Of
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I could be one too.
Like,
Of and
you come face to face with a deep one, and on his shoulder, on his left shoulder, he has the same matching tattoo that you and your best friend got when you guys were serving in the Navy together. You know?
yeah, and so that part, that weird body horror aspect should be, so it's like we're talking about with technology, where it's like that realization that your high end underwater sonar fish detector is compromised because all of the people that are in charge of the technology that created it are compromised. That is another layer of it, of that uncovering not just a horrific, scary looking monster, but uncovering that it is a very deep and vast conspiracy at play here. So then you throw in the body horror and all that. So I think if you do approach Deep Winds that way, the sand loss that they cause starts becoming much more formidable, and much more than just the simple, oh, you see a deep one, it's a D6, or maybe we beefed it up to a D8. It's like, at that point, it's like, yeah, that's just a drop of the bucket to the amount of sand loss that I've had, realizing how elaborate these are.
If played right, when these characters begin to have the realization of how vast and integrated Deep One, uh, the Deep One spy network is in humanity, it could almost become a Kaiser Sose reveal sand loss. You know, where you're like this and that and this and that, and suddenly all the strings on the chalkboard, on the corkboard, are tying together all the little push pins, and you're just like, oh my god.
Oh no! You drop your coffee cup, but at the bottom is like yeah,
Kobayashi.
yeah. It's like Dagon.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, they own everything. So I think if you use the sand loss in those ways, it can add a lot more. If we start bringing in all the other aspects of what they are and what they can do, that the fact that they're only a D6 is kind of just a minor thing. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
blessing, because by the time they finally see one, it should be like, dude, I'm already at indefinite insane, just due to having uncovered all of this conspiracy and all the different aspects that, oh wow, there's one. Uh, but I know the larger story. So the fact that it is a bipedal hopping, mm, smelly, bug-eyed thing, that it, yeah, what's behind it and the empire that it's a member of, that's the sand loss.
Mm, this is awesome. Deep Ones are fantastic. They're a great creature, and it's a great element to include in your campaigns for sure.
No, and like I said, I still love the idea of doing like the kind of weird campaign of the one shot where you you are all hybrids that are either trying to stop the transformation, or you're quite literally on a mission from the deep ones, and you're trying to assimilate into human culture to do a job, except for like the most recent cultural stuff is also like 10 years behind. So
Yep. Yep.
and yeah, so they're just kind of driving around trying to find whatever artifact is missing. It's like, we can't let the humans figure out that they got the whatever, or we got to get our stuff back, or whatever it is. And it's their mission, and they're all hideous, and they're trying to blend in, because they have their own mythos entity that they're trying to deal with, that's their foe, and humanity is almost their mythos entity as well, that they have to deal with, because of like, what are these things? So I think they make a fun little twist, because uh, I don't know. I think the fact that the game really always focuses on them being, always have to be the antagonist. It's like we talked about with ghouls. Like, I think we've got a lot of potential for the fun realization of, guess what, you're one now.
Yeah, no, those are great. That could be a really cool collection, like a single collection where they're all just one shots. Where you are the ghouls, you are the deep ones, you are the whatever, and just hmm,
You're the brain and the jaw that has now been given a new human body. You have to do a mission for the
yeah. Oh,
ego.
yeah, yeah. You are the Yithians, yeah, and that too, right? So okay, all right. Well, let's bring this to a close. This was
I
awesome.
know, we've been geeking out for a while.
Pretty awesome. I like it. We want to thank our patrons for supporting us. We honestly could not do this show without you, and we've got a couple of new patrons to thank. So thank you, Nate Bob Benton. We really appreciate your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nate. And also, Austin Culp, thank you very much for your support.
Yes, thank you so much, Austin. We really appreciate it. If you're interested in supporting the show and want to become a patron, go to patreon.com/modern_mythos, and you'll find out how to join there. So,
And one benefit to being a patron for Modern Mythos is John and I, this past year, immortalized some of our patrons in a book of mythosy artifacts, appropriately titled Mythos Artifacts, which is available down in the Miskatonic repository for Drive Through RPG, where John and I spent a while coming up with kind of interesting things that keepers could sprinkle into their game. And since we needed to have a lot of names, we turned to our patron as good inspirations for names. And we have some other projects that we're working on that we are going to need some names for. But that's a good reason to join. But you can also pick up the modern or the Mythos Artifacts book on Drive Through RPG. Link below in the show notes.
awesome. Well, we cannot do this show alone. We want to thank our amazing editors, Max Mahafa and Edwin Nagy, for their hard work, keen skills at making us sound awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, because they know exactly how many awkward silences John and I have staring at each other. Only they know. We also want to thank John Sumrow for our badass logo. He's a very talented artist, so please follow him on Facebook and check out his official website. Please consider joining his Patreon account. Links below in the show notes. And you can also see his work on the cover of Mythos Artifacts.
Ah, yes. And finally, we want to thank the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets for generously allowing us to use their song Gluttony as both our intro and outro music. If you're a fan of Lovecraft's writing and the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, then you really need to check out the Darkest of the Hillside Thickets. Check out their Bandcamp site and their official band site. We'll have links to both of those in the show notes.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.